All right, guys, I want to ask you a quick question. What is the most underrated thing doctors do to save your life? Number one, be a doctor.
What do you mean be a doctor? He's a doctor.
Well, if he wasn't a doctor, would he be able to save your life? Number two, do their homework. Because if he didn't study for the exam, would you feel safe when you getting surgery from this dude who never did his homework? Number three, the most underrated thing that doctors do to save our lives: wash their hands. I'm going to tell you guys the story of the doctor who discovered the importance of washing hands. His name is Ignaz Schlemdevars. That's what I said. Ignacio Silverstein. Knutson.
Ignaz Semmelweis.
Ignaz Semmelweis. My brother Ignaz Semmelweis was an obstetrician in Hungary about 18th century. This man had a 1 in 10 mortality rate, which means 1 out of every 10 women that he helped give birth, that's right, you guessed it, would die. This brother was not very good at his job. This is how bad he was. There were women who would get pregnant, be at 9 months, ready to give birth, and they would give birth outside of the hospital and then go in with their baby connected to their body saying, I'm ready. As you can imagine, Brother Semmelweis was trying to figure out, okay, what am I doing wrong? So he went through the list. Maybe it's a ventilation issue and he would really focus on opening windows. He said maybe it's a laundry issue. So they standardized laundry in the hospital. He said, well, maybe it's an issue with inflammation. So they started to actually give these women leeches and put them on their body. He attempted to address every single issue possible, but you know what? He was missing the point. He was missing this thing that he couldn't see. Brother Semmelweis had to leave for 4 months to do some work at another hospital. While he was gone, yeah, you guessed it, the mortality rate, it got better. He came back, learned the news, and tried to figure out, like, well, what is it? What is it about me? What he learned was he was dealing with cadavers and then going to help these women give birth. What he was passing on, germs, bacteria, things that he couldn't see, because at that time they didn't know. It's really important to wash your hands. Can you imagine the shock or disgust of being a doctor whose job is to save lives, and then you learn you are the very problem and the reason why people's lives are being lost? There's something that we all suffer from, just like Ignaz, that didn't allow him to see the problem. And it was an issue of self-deception. Have you ever suffered from that affliction? You know what I'm talking about? That problem where you think you know something, and the fact that you think you know something is the very thing that is preventing you from seeing what you need to see. Because here was a doctor who couldn't see that he was the problem. Here's a doctor who couldn't see, even at that time, that there's this invisible thing on his hands. It's hard to see what is invisible. When Mr. Semmelweis discovered this, he had a choice. He could have continued to ignore this, but no, he decided, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna create a standard procedure that we, as doctors, now need to wash our hands before every single patient. So my brothers and sisters, here's my invitation today. What if we were to wash our hands? I wonder what it looks like to wash our hands of self-deception. I wonder if we had a step-by-step process to say, this is what we need to do to make sure that we save not only our life, but the lives of people around us. So here's the first step. The first thing that we have to do is be humble. See, for Dr. Semmelweis, he wasn't able to see this thing because he was blinded by his position. He was blinded by his authority. He was blinded by his title. You ever be around somebody who says, like, don't you know who I am? That pride, that arrogance is what blinded him. Step 2 is invite curiosity. See, I wonder what questions you aren't asking yourself. Those questions that you aren't willing to ask yourself are holding you back from seeing what you need to see. If he would have just invited this curiosity, if he would have just asked these specific questions, for example, see, what are the midwives doing that we aren't doing? What are we doing that they aren't doing? And this was the simple answer. Midwives were not handling cadavers. The good doctor was. See, what would it look like if we, on a regular basis, invited curiosity in order to wash our hands of self-deception? And the last element of our hand washing process in the realm of self-deception is this: open yourself up for feedback. Once Dr. Semmelweis figured out what was happening, once he started to clean up his act, he invited other people into the process, but they weren't open to feedback. No, there were many doctors that were closed off. They didn't want to hear it. They thought that they knew everything. Now imagine how many lives were lost because they weren't open to feedback. If we want to wash our hands of self-deception, let us open our lives up to what other people have to say. And it doesn't mean that everything they say is right. If we're going to wash our hands of self-deception, then we must refuse to close ourselves off to constructive criticism, because sometimes, yes, sometimes what other people can see is exactly what we need to grow. So may we learn a lesson from the story of Ignaz Semmelweis, and may we join together and wash our hands of pride and choose humility. May we wash our hands of stubbornness and choose curiosity. May we join together and refuse the spirit of knowing it all by opening ourselves up to feedback. And then, and only then, my brothers and sisters, will we rid our lives of self-deception.